And you're listening to 15 Minutes. Today we'll be exposing the inside investigation of the murder of Alison Baden-Clay.
Coming out of his parents' home, the pain and strain of the last 5 days was clear to see across Gerard Baden-Clay's face.
I'm trying to look after my children at the moment. They've got 3 young girls, and we really trust that the police are doing everything they can to find my wife, and we just hope that she'll come home soon.
9 News understands Mr Baden-Clay has hired lawyers and has been in regular contact with detectives.
I've spoken to the police about everything, and I've had no contact from her at all.
Alison Baden-Clay, a woman whose death affected the entire nation. Body found dumped under the Colo Bridge by offender and husband Gerard Baden-Clay. All started in the early morning of April 20th, 2012, when high-pitched screams were heard coming from the Baden-Clay Brookfield estate. Shortly after, at 7:15 a.m, the offender reported Alison's disappearance, claiming he last visited her the night before at 10 p.m. His alibi? He was asleep. Legal measures were enforced for the search and investigation for the body of Alison Baden-Clay by the Brisbane Police Force, who widened the search by placing a mannequin in the backyard of the Brookfield estate, searching into bins of local shopping centres, leading neighbours to check the land. On April 26th, the police informed the media that this crime was not random and the killer will be found. The community took initiative by holding a prayer vigil in honour of Alison at the Anglican parish of Kenmore. Friend Beverly Bell stated it is a difficult time for the community. After that peculiar phone call, April 30th, 2012, a body was found under the Colo Bridge, which is right behind me. This body was discovered and identified as Alison's. Her family were truly devastated. The mystery was then exposed by the media, who continuously questioned the evidence discovered and Mr Baden-Clay's judgments of the matter. Toxicology results are discharged and Gerard Baden-Clay is seized. It wasn't until June 13th Mr Baden-Clay was formally interviewed, remanded in custody and charged with the murder of his wife Alison Baden-Clay, in addition for the interference with the corpse of the victim. However, the father of 3 continuously forged his identity as a passionate, loving, caring man whose wife mysteriously disappeared one morning after going for a walk. Mr Baden-Clay's story is contradicted to evidence, exposing his lies one at a time. Despite Mr Baden-Clay's ongoing presentations of innocence, there now seems a little conjecture that on the night of April 19, 2012, Gerard Baden-Clay killed his wife Alison. Did Baden-Clay in fact murder his wife, or was her death just an accident?
There was no direct evidence presented to the jury that convicted the offender of murdering his wife. However, the prosecution's circumstantial case proved extremely sturdy, as Alison's blood was identified in the Baden-Clay car. Her fingernails were significantly marked on his face, as witnessed prior leaf shrubs near the couple's carport were found in Alison's hair. There were prominent organisms that painted the garden floor in the Baden-Clay's Brookfield backyard. Those same organisms also decorated Alison's jumper and hair, which was noticed pulled over her head on her decaying. Sergeant Brett Schnitzerling informed the court he discovered human bloodstains in the couple's 8-week-old Holden Captiva, with a basket of toys covering the evidence. It was the victim's blood. Officers testified about the CCTV vision taken from a roundabout in Kenmore, midway between the Baden-Clay home and the location of the deceased body, displaying the silver Captiva on the evening of Alison's disappearance. Then the lights shone to the light, as the offender insinuated to the police he slept all night on the fateful evening. However, evidence shows his iPhone was plugged to be charged at precisely 1:48 a.m. Mr Baden-Clay told police Alison went walking in the mornings, but informed his friend she always walked at 10 p.m. The offender even sent police on 2 different walking routes in an attempt to find Alison, despite admitting to her parents that he never knew where she walked. Then the piece of evidence the police deemed bolstered the case, providing its emotional element: the scratches on his face and neck, intense wounds that were fingernailed with, and potential signs of a struggle. He defended himself, stating they were shaving cuts. However, the razor seized gave no indication. Blaming the scratches on his neck were caused by an itchy reaction caused by an itchy caterpillar falling on him whilst in the yard. However, experts found no existence of such creatures in his yard.
If any factors attributed this indictable offence to transpire?
Absolutely. Gerard's business was going to liquidate, and his mistress, Tony McHugh, who were colleagues, began their affair in 2008, was placing pressure in order to leave his wife. As quoted, "He told me he will leave his wife and marry me one day."
In front of 5 High Court judges, the Crown alleged Gerard Baden-Clay's affair and dire financial problems, including the cost of any separation, were a motive for him to murder Alison Baden-Clay. Do you believe this is appropriate?
Absolutely, as a forensic probe of Baden-Clay's finances, also the fact that he owed $1 million to various people. Detectives reveal Baden-Clay phoned the insurer a week before he killed Alison. However, the offender was told he could not be given any information as he was not the policyholder. Furthermore, endeavouring to cash in his wife's $400,000 life insurance policy just a day after her body was discovered.
What were some of the legal methods obtained in order to gather this significant evidence?
Many legal mechanisms were acquired in order to corroborate this case. These include the police investigations and interviews, the marriage counsellor consolidating suggestive information, allowing an inside view of the relationship. Forensics settled the altercations which arose through the toxicology reports and DNA collection. The media contributed through continuously reporting evidence which surfaced.
Consolidate regarding the DNA collection.
Forensic pathologists have argued that the offender's DNA was evident under Alison Baden-Clay's left hand. The Crown alleged Mrs. Baden-Clay used her left hand to scratch her husband's right cheek as she was quoted, fighting for her life. It was also revealed the victim suffered from anxiety and depression, leading her to consume the antidepressants on the evening of the tragedy, which were later discovered within the blood in her liver. The victim's DNA were found in the offender's car.
He administrated about the bail application which was lodged by the offender, Gerard Baden-Clay.
After the defendant was charged with murder and kept within remand, he lodged for a bail application within the Supreme Court on the 21st of June 2012. However, refused the next day due to the justice's opinions that the defendant would run from the authorities. A second bail application was lodged on the 14th of December 2012 in the Supreme Court, with the defence lawyer arguing the results of post-mortem examination of the victim with the antidepressants indicating that she could have killed herself, which weakened the Crown case. However, this was again dismissed with the justice indicating that the strength of the Crown case remains unaffected by the results.
That there has been a miscarriage in justice regarding the arrest of Mr. Baden-Clay, as he was charged with principal in the first degree to the murder of his wife Alison.
No, as every circumstantial evidence of this case brings the offender's verdict as guilty. There was sufficient evidence that Baden-Clay found living with his wife intolerable and unendurable. One could conclude that this man is truly capable of murder.
The committal hearing was held on the 11th of March 2013 in the local court and continued for over 2 weeks. Consisting of 6 days prior, the magistrate decided that the case had substantial evidence, resulting in a trial. The Crown was led by the prosecuting barrister Daniel Boyle, whom questioned 40 witnesses, and a travel agent neighbour, Kerry Ann Walker, whom testified Alison's fluctuating periods of depression dating back to her honeymoon in 1997. Haman stated to the court, quoted, "Alison's hyoid bone was still intact, meaning she wasn't manually strangled." Forensic expert Dr. Leslie Griffin gave evidence towards the case, cementing the supposed razor scratches were most likely caused by fingernails, however, are possibly self-induced or caused due to the razor. She stated that the injuries could be explained by a convex nail being drawn down the face, producing an elongated wound. Many witnesses indicated they had heard high-pitched yells and screams emerging from the Baden-Clay home. This substantial evidence committed Mr. Baden-Clay to stand for trial for the murder of his wife, Alison Baden-Clay, on the 20th of March 2013. The Assembly of Jurors was held on the 2nd of June 2014, in which consisted of 3 peculiar questions. Were they immediate family or lived in the Brookfield area in April 2012? If they contributed funds to the disappearance of the deceased? And if they have ever had a view on the guilt or innocence of the accused? The original trial commenced on the 10th of June 2014 in the Supreme Court and spread for 4 weeks, where the accused pleaded not guilty to the murder of his wife Alison Baden-Clay 2 years prior. The judge's comments were of high regard prior to the jury deliberation, as he outlined the case. Due to the significant amount of evidence which arose to the duration of the trial, Justice John Byrne was able to summon the incident for the jury, stating both direct and circumstantial evidence are to be considered. It is necessary that the facts be proven by direct evidence, indicating he wants the jury to recognise all the evidence in order for a fair trial to proceed. The defence case focus on the scratches concerned whether or not there is sufficient body or scientific literature regarding shaving type injuries and the dynamic of fingernails, rather than focusing on the evidence collected by the police and the Brookfield community. Whereas the prosecution case presented a murder case based on circumstantial evidence collected through the investigation in order to expose the guilt or innocence of Gerard Baden-Clay. The Crown charged the accused and a hearing occurred to prove that the respondent killed his wife and that mens rea was present beyond a reasonable doubt. The Crown called witnesses such as Dr. Marlon to support the case, and the wounds on Mr. Baden-Clay were not self-induced. The wounds were inflicted by Alison during a physical assault by her husband. Thus, disregard the scratch marks were caused by a razor, contradicting the defense story of scratching his face while shaving, exposing a consciousness of guilt. The jury were given the option by the judge to conclude if Gerard Baden-Clay was truly innocent or guilty to the murder of his wife Alison Baden-Clay, and then asked if the defendant was guilty or innocent to manslaughter. On July 15th, Justice John Burns sentenced Gerard Baden-Clay to life imprisonment with non-parole of 15 years, after the jury depicted that the accused was guilty to the murder of Alison Baden-Clay. The case was appealed on the 7th of August 2015 by Gerard Baden-Clay, declaring he has unintentionally killed his wife Alison Baden-Clay in a physical altercation, and his panic motivated his cruel actions and attemptation to hide the body. The Supreme Court of Appeal substituted the murder conviction to manslaughter, as there was a reasonable conjecture to the innocence of Gerard Baden-Clay. Although he lied about the scratches on his face, this appeal resulted in the murder conviction to be downgraded to manslaughter, as the proposition was sustained that the crime occurred unintentionally during an altercation. An appeal was launched on December 30th, 2015, on the basis of the intense commotion for the need of achievement for justice for Alison and the community. On May 12, 2016, the High Court granted the appeal as mens rea was yet to be proved. The High Court made an arbitration stating, quoted, "The High Court held that the hypothesis on which the Court of Appeal acted was not available on the evidence." The murder conviction was overturned by the High Court of Australia with a life sentence in prison and the result of setting a significant precedent. It was through this that justice was achieved for Alison Baden-Clay and the nation. I'm Alana Obatar, and thanks for your time.